Ambassador Kim Minji felt her heart racing as the transport shuttle docked with the massive Galactic Council station. Through the viewport, she could see the enormous structure spinning slowly against the backdrop of distant stars. This was humanity's first chance to join the galactic community, and the weight of representing her entire species pressed heavily on her shoulders. The shuttle doors hissed open, and Minji stepped onto the crystalline platform. The artificial gravity felt slightly different here, making each step feel like she was walking through water. The platform itself was made of some translucent material that seemed to glow from within, casting rainbow patterns across her dark blue diplomatic uniform. The chamber ahead was beyond anything she had imagined. It stretched upward for what seemed like kilometers, with floating platforms at different levels holding representatives from dozens of alien species. But three groups clearly dominated the space, their platforms positioned highest and closest to the central speaking area. The Vorthak were impossible to ignore. These beings looked like they had been carved from living crystal, their bodies catching and reflecting light in brilliant displays. They stood 3 meters tall, their forms constantly shifting between different geometric shapes. When they moved, it sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Below them floated the Quillen platforms. These insectoid creatures moved with perfect coordination, their 6 legs carrying them in synchronized patterns. Their bodies were covered in black chitin that gleamed like polished metal, and their compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights like thousands of tiny mirrors. When one spoke, they all spoke, their voices creating an eerie harmony. The third dominant group was the strangest of all. The Nexari had no physical bodies that Minji could see. Instead, they appeared as swirling clouds of energy, shifting between colors that had no names in human language. They communicated through pulses of light and electromagnetic fields that the translation devices converted into words. Minji walked to the center of the speaking platform, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. She had practiced this speech hundreds of times, but standing here now, surrounded by beings that had mastered space travel when humanity was still learning to make fire, she felt very small. Honored representatives of the Galactic Council, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the advanced acoustics of the chamber. I am Ambassador Kim Minji of Earth. Humanity seeks recognition and membership in this esteemed council. The translation devices around the chamber hummed to life, converting her words into the complex languages of dozens of species. She heard clicks, whistles, electronic tones, and sounds that human ears were not designed to process. The lead Vorthak representative shifted its crystalline form, the light patterns within its body pulsing with what Minji had learned to recognize as disdain. When it spoke, its voice sounded like stones grinding against each other. Your species has barely learned to leave your home system, the Vorthak said. Your technology is primitive, your understanding of galactic law is non-existent. We might consider probationary status for humanity. Perhaps in a century or two, you may prove worthy of true membership. Minji felt her jaw clench, but she kept her voice steady. With respect, honored Vorthak, humanity has established colonies across 17 star systems. We have developed faster-than-light travel, quantum communication networks, and we have peaceful trade agreements with 6 minor species. We do not seek charity. We seek equal standing among the stars. The chamber erupted in what the translation devices interpreted as laughter. The sounds were alien and disturbing, electronic pulses from the Nexari, clicking from the Quillen, and harmonic resonances from the Vorthak. Smaller species added their own sounds to the chorus of derision. The Quillen hive mind spoke next, all of their representatives moving their mandibles in perfect unison. Arrogant mammals, they said, their collective voice creating strange harmonies. You understand nothing of galactic order. Your species has existed for mere moments compared to ours. Minji straightened her shoulders, drawing on years of diplomatic training. Then teach us, she replied firmly. We came here seeking partnership, not to be lectured like children. If there are things we need to learn, we are willing students. But we will not accept being treated as inferior simply because we are young. The Nexari's energy form began to flicker more rapidly, the colors shifting toward the red end of the spectrum. Even without understanding their biology, Minji could tell this was a sign of anger. You dare make demands of the council. The Nexari pulsed, their electromagnetic field causing the translation devices to crackle with static. Your species has no understanding of respect. Perhaps a lesson is required. Minji felt a chill run down her spine as she noticed the change in atmosphere. The smaller alien species were backing away from their platforms, moving toward the chamber exits. The 3 dominant species were positioning themselves in a triangular formation around her. A deep hum began to vibrate through the station's hull. At first, Minji thought it was just the normal sounds of the massive structure, but the frequency was increasing. The crystalline platform beneath her feet began to resonate, creating a musical tone that grew louder with each passing second. For the crime of insolence before the Galactic Council, the Vorthak announced, its crystalline form now blazing with internal light, let this serve as an example to all lesser species who forget their place. Minji realized with horror that the ancient weapons systems of the orbital platform were activating. Targeting systems were locking onto her position, and there was nowhere to run. The chamber's exits were too far away, and the alien representatives watched with cold interest. As the incineration beam began to form above her, Minji looked directly into the recording devices she knew would broadcast this moment across known space. Her final words were clear and strong, "Remember this moment." Admiral Park Jin-ho was sitting at his desk in his private quarters aboard the UES Defiance when the emergency transmission came through. The red alert light on his communication panel blinked urgently, and he knew immediately that something terrible had happened. He had been expecting word from the Galactic Council meeting, hoping for good news about humanity's application for membership. The holographic display activated, showing the face of Communications Officer Lieutenant Kim So-hyun. Her expression was grave, and Jin-ho could see that she had been crying. "Sir," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "you need to see this transmission from the Galactic Council station. It's about Ambassador Kim Minji." Jin-ho felt his stomach drop. He had known Minji since their days at the Naval Academy on Earth. She had chosen the diplomatic path while he had chosen the military, but they had remained close friends. She was one of the smartest, most capable people he had ever known. "Put it through," he ordered. The display changed, showing grainy footage from the council chamber. Jin-ho watched in growing horror as he saw Minji standing alone on the crystalline platform, surrounded by hostile alien representatives. He heard her strong voice as she defended humanity's right to equal membership. Then came the moment that would change everything. The incineration beam struck her without warning. One moment she was standing proud and defiant, the next she was gone, consumed by energy that left nothing behind. The footage was being broadcast across all human communication networks, and Jin-ho knew that billions of people were watching the same terrible scene. His hands began to tremble as the full meaning hit him. They had murdered a diplomat. An unarmed woman whose only crime was asking for equality. The aliens had executed her like a common criminal, broadcasting her death as a warning to humanity. Jin-ho replayed the footage 3 times, studying every detail. The casual way the aliens had ordered her death. The complete lack of trial or negotiation. The cold satisfaction in their voices as they called it a lesson in respect. This was not an accident or a misunderstanding. This was deliberate murder. Across human space, the same scene was playing out on every world, every station, every ship. On the mining colonies of the Kepler system, workers stopped their machines and gathered around public screens. On the agricultural worlds of the Centauri colonies, farmers left their fields to watch the news broadcasts. On trading ships traveling between systems, crews turned their vessels around and headed for home. President Lee Hyun-woo addressed the nation from his office in Seoul. The elderly leader, who had spent his entire career working for peace and cooperation, looked older than his 70 years as he spoke to the cameras. "Citizens of humanity," he said, his voice heavy with grief and anger, "we extended our hand in friendship to the galaxy. We sought only recognition and equal partnership among the stars. They answered our peaceful gesture with murder." The president paused, looking directly into the camera. Ambassador Kim Minji died believing that diplomatic solutions were possible. She died believing that reason and justice could prevail. Her death will not be meaningless. We will not forget what they have done. In the military headquarters on Luna, emergency meetings were already underway. Generals and admirals who had spent decades planning for exploration and defense now found themselves preparing for something else entirely. War was coming, and everyone knew it. Within 6 hours of the transmission, the Terran Defense Force issued new orders to every military installation. Admiral Park Jin-ho found a priority message waiting for him when he returned to his command center. He had been promoted to Supreme Commander and given authority over all human military forces. His aide, Captain Song Yuna, rushed into his office with reports from across human space. "Sir," she said, barely able to contain her excitement, "you need to see these numbers. Industrial output has increased by 400% in the last 12 hours. Every shipyard is now working triple shifts. The mining colonies are diverting all their resources to military production." Jin-ho studied the displays showing human space. 17 star systems, each one burning with the same cold fury that he felt in his own heart. On every world, factories that had been producing civilian goods were now making weapons and armor. Shipyards that had been building exploration vessels were now constructing warships. The recruitment centers are being overwhelmed, Captain Song continued. Every colony is sending volunteers. Even the pacifist settlements on New Geneva are asking how they can help. Jinho nodded grimly. He had served in the military for 20 years, but he had never seen anything like this. Humanity was transforming itself from a peaceful, exploring species into something else. Something dangerous. Sir, Song asked quietly, what are your orders? Jinho looked at the strategic map showing the location of Galactic Council territory. They were much larger than humanity, with more advanced technology and thousands of years of experience. But they had made one critical mistake. They had assumed that humans would react like other species, accepting their fate and begging for mercy. They killed one diplomat and thought we would be scared, Jinho said, his voice cold as space itself. They thought we would crawl back to our little corner of the galaxy and hide. They're about to learn what humans do when diplomacy fails. He activated the fleet-wide communication system, broadcasting to every human ship, station, and outpost in the galaxy. This is Supreme Commander Park Jinho to all human forces. Humanity tried peace. They gave us war. We accept. 6 months had passed since Ambassador Kim Minji died on the Galactic Council station. 6 months of preparation, planning, and building. Now, at the edge of Vorthak space, Supreme Commander Park Jinho stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched as 300 human vessels dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. The fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Colony ships that once carried families and supplies to new worlds now bristled with missile launchers and energy weapons. Cargo haulers had been converted into carrier platforms, their holds filled with automated fighter craft. Purpose-built destroyers, fresh from the shipyards of Mars and Titan, formed the fleet's backbone with their sleek, predatory designs. Captain Oh Sungmin commanded the vanguard aboard the UES Retribution *, one of humanity's newest warships. His sensors detected the enemy fleet almost immediately as they arranged themselves in the void ahead. He opened a channel to the Supreme Commander. Enemy crystalline formations detected at bearing 27 Mark IV, he reported, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. Sir, I have to admit, they're beautiful. The way their ships catch the starlight and reflect it back in those geometric patterns. Through the view screen, Jinho could see what Sungmin meant. The Vorthak fleet looked like floating works of art, their crystal ships arranged in perfect mathematical formations that created stunning light displays against the darkness of space. Each vessel was a masterpiece of alien engineering, shaped like massive gemstones that pulsed with internal energy. Beauty won't save them, Jinho replied coldly, his thoughts returning to the image of Minja's final moments that he carried with him always. All units, execute Protocol Omega. The Vorthak had been fighting wars for thousands of years, but their conflicts were ritualized affairs with predetermined rules and acceptable casualty limits. They expected their enemies to announce themselves, arrange their forces in traditional formations, and engage in honorable combat according to ancient galactic customs. They arranged their crystal ships in the standard diamond formation, waiting for the humans to do the same. Their commanders sent diplomatic frequencies, expecting to negotiate terms of engagement and discuss acceptable losses. They had no idea what was coming. Instead of forming up for a traditional battle, human vessels scattered and attacked from 17 different vectors simultaneously. The Vorthak formation, designed to repel frontal assaults, found itself surrounded and overwhelmed within minutes. Their beautiful geometric patterns became death traps as human ships struck from above, below, and all sides at once. Major Cho Minji led her fighter squadron in a diving attack through the heart of the Vorthak formation. Her small craft moved like angry wasps, too fast and too small for the crystal ship's main weapons to track effectively. Human scientists had spent months studying captured Vorthak technology, looking for weaknesses. Targeting structural resonance points, she reported as her squadron's weapons found their marks. Their crystals resonate at specific frequencies. Hit them right, and the whole ship vibrates itself apart. They're not really ships at all, they're instruments, and we're playing a death song on them. The effect was devastating. Crystal ships that had survived centuries of warfare shattered like glass struck by a hammer. The Vorthak had built their vessels for beauty and tradition, not for the brutal efficiency that humanity brought to war. The Quillen Hive fleet arrived expecting to find human forces locked in combat with their Vorthak allies. Instead, they found only wreckage floating in space and human vessels already moving to new positions. The insectoid collective consciousness, used to predictable patterns of behavior, struggled to process human unpredictability. "They're not fighting like any species we've encountered," the Quillen commanders reported to each other through their shared mental link. "They ignore all established protocols. They attack civilians. They show no mercy to surrendering vessels." But the space battle was only the beginning. Lieutenant Colonel Kang Wonho led the ground assault on the Vorthak colony world of Kepler-7, a planet that had been settled for over 3,000 years. The crystalline cities below were architectural marvels, their spires reaching toward the sky in perfect harmony with the planet's natural beauty. Kang addressed his Marines as they prepared for the orbital drop. These were not the same soldiers who had once protected human colonies from pirates and natural disasters. 6 months of intensive training and bitter purpose had forged them into something harder, colder. "Remember what we learned in training," he told them as they checked their weapons and armor. "These aliens have never seen total war. They think in terms of acceptable losses and negotiated surrenders. They fight until it becomes inconvenient, then they expect to talk peace and keep most of what they had." He gestured toward the viewports showing the crystal cities below. "We don't think that way. We think in terms of victory or death. They killed Ambassador Minji thinking we would submit. Today we show them what that mistake cost them." The kinetic bombardment platforms deployed from orbit, raining destruction on the crystalline cities below. Structures that had stood for millennia cracked and fell like broken glass. The Vorthak defenders, trained for ceremonial conflicts with limited objectives, found themselves facing an enemy that sought complete annihilation of their capability to resist. Across the galaxy, other species watched the feeds from Kepler-7 in growing horror. Humanity was demonstrating something that civilized galactic society had forgotten, that war could be fought without rules, without mercy, without limits. They were seeing what humans had learned from centuries of warfare among themselves. When survival was at stake, there were no rules at all. 3 years of war had changed the galaxy forever. Supreme Commander Park Jin-ho stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the tactical displays that showed the final stronghold of his enemies. Nexus Prime hung in space before them like a glowing jewel, its ancient surface covered with defense systems that had protected the Galactic Council for 10,000 years. The planet was massive, twice the size of Earth, with orbital rings that sparkled with automated weapon platforms. Energy shields shimmered around it like soap bubbles, each layer capable of stopping entire fleets. Deep within the planet's crust lay bunkers and command centers that the Council believed were impregnable. But Jinho had seen what 3 years of total war could accomplish. The proud Vorthak were gone, their crystal ships nothing but glittering debris floating in dead space around their shattered worlds. The Quillen hive mind had been broken, scattered across a dozen refugee camps on distant planets where they struggled to maintain their collective consciousness. Only the Nexari energy beings remained in significant numbers, but even they flickered with something Jinho had learned to recognize as fear. Admiral Kim Dongwoo entered the bridge, carrying a datapad with the final engineering reports. Dongwoo had been one of humanity's top scientists before the war, specializing in theoretical physics. Now he spent his time finding ways to turn alien technology into weapons of mass destruction. "Sir," Dongwoo reported, his voice tired but satisfied, "we've successfully reverse-engineered their quantum resonance technology. The planet cracker is ready for deployment." Jinho nodded grimly. It had taken the Council species thousands of years to develop their advanced technologies. Human scientists, working with captured equipment and driven by cold fury, had mastered the same principles in mere months. They had taken the aliens' own weapons and improved them, making them more efficient, more deadly. "How long until we can fire?" Jinho asked. "The weapon is charging now. We'll be ready in 6 hours, Dongwoo replied. "Sir, the power requirements are enormous. We're drawing energy from every ship in the fleet. When we fire this thing, it's going to split the planet apart from its core." Down on the surface of Nexus Prime, Captain Bae Jiwon was completing the most dangerous mission of the war. She had led a special operations team through the planet's underground tunnel systems, avoiding detection by the Council's sensors. Her team consisted of 12 soldiers, all volunteers who knew they probably would not survive the mission. They had been moving through the ancient tunnels for 3 days, placing explosive charges on the shield generators that protected the planet. The tunnels were works of art, carved from living rock and decorated with murals showing the history of galactic civilization. Jiwon felt no admiration for the beauty around her. Every carving reminded her of the arrogance that had led to Ambassador Kim Minja's murder. Final charges placed, she transmitted to the fleet above, her voice barely a whisper to avoid detection. "We're positioned at the primary shield generator. On your order, sir." Above the planet, the human fleet had arranged itself in a sphere formation, completely surrounding Nexus Prime. There were over 800 ships now, ranging from massive dreadnoughts to small fighters. Every vessel in humanity's arsenal had been brought to this final battle. The siege began on a Monday morning, Earth time. Human ships launched wave after wave of attacks against the planetary defenses. The Council's automated weapons responded with devastating barrages, but they were designed to fight conventional wars against predictable enemies. They struggled against human tactics that seemed to have no pattern or logic. Boring machines, originally built for asteroid mining in the outer colonies, began carving through the planet's crust. These massive devices could tunnel through solid rock, creating passages for human ground forces to infiltrate the underground complexes. The Council had never faced an enemy that would literally dig through an entire planet to reach them. Fighter squadrons led by Major Cho Minji, now promoted to colonel after 3 years of victories, harassed the orbital platforms. Her pilots had become experts at finding weak points in alien technology. They flew their ships like extensions of their own bodies, dancing between energy beams and missile swarms. Their targeting systems are too slow, she reported during one attack run. They are designed for the stately movements of crystal ships, not for human fighters. We're like mosquitoes to them, annoying, persistent, and impossible to swat. On the third day, the first shield layer failed. Captain BAE's explosives had done their work, creating gaps in the defensive grid. Human ships poured through the openings, attacking the next layer of defenses. The Council's energy beings tried to reinforce the failing systems, but their ethereal forms were no match for the physical reality of human weapons. By the 5th day, human ground forces had reached the surface of Nexus Prime. They fought through crystal gardens and energy parks, places of beauty that had never seen violence. The few Council defenders they encountered fought with desperation, but they were scientists and bureaucrats, not soldiers. On the 7th day, Supreme Commander Park Jin-ho made his final decision. The quantum resonance weapon was fully charged, drawing power from every reactor in the human fleet. The planet cracker was ready to fire. All ships, withdraw to minimum safe distance, he ordered. Captain BAE, extract your team immediately. Negative, sir, came BAE's reply from deep within the planet. We can't reach the extraction point in time. Proceed with the operation. Jin-ho closed his eyes for a moment, thinking of all the brave soldiers who had died in this war. Then he opened them and gave the order that would end the Galactic Council forever. Fire. The planet cracker beam struck Nexus Prime with the force of a dying star. The weapon tore through the planet's crust, reaching down to its molten core and destabilizing the fundamental forces that held the world together. Nexus Prime began to break apart from within, its ancient surface cracking like an eggshell. As the fortress world died in fire and destruction, Jin-ho activated the fleet's communication system and broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every surviving species in the galaxy would hear his words. You killed one human diplomat, he said, his voice carrying across space to reach every corner of known civilization. We have killed 3 civilizations in return. Let this be remembered by all who remain. Harm one human, an answer to all humanity. 5 years had passed since the day that changed everything. Admiral Park Jin-ho, now bearing the title of Supreme Commander of the Terran Hegemony, walked slowly through the rebuilt chamber where Ambassador Kim Minji had died. The same crystalline platform remained, but everything else had changed completely. The walls that once displayed the proud symbols of the Galactic Council now bore human insignia, the blue and white flag of Earth surrounded by 17 stars representing humanity's colonies. Memorial plaques lined the corridors, each one bearing the name of a human who had died in the war that followed. But the largest memorial stood in the center of the chamber, where Minji had made her final stand. The galaxy was a very different place now. Species that had once dismissed humans as primitive newcomers now sent ambassadors with tribute and gifts, hoping to gain favor with their new rulers. The proud alien civilizations that had dominated space for thousands of years now competed with each other to serve humanity's interests. President Shin Tae-young stood at the same podium where Minji had spoken 5 years earlier. The elderly leader had been elected on a platform of reconstruction and galactic governance. Before him sat representatives from dozens of alien species, all waiting to hear what humanity required of them. The old galactic order died with Ambassador Kim Minji, President Shin announced to the assembled delegates. His voice carried easily through the chamber's advanced sound system, and translation devices converted his words into the languages of 50 different species. The new order begins with her memory and the lessons learned from her sacrifice. In the administrative sections of the station, Captain Lee Jion worked at her desk processing applications for membership in the Terran hegemony. She had been promoted to Director of Alien Affairs, a position that would have been unthinkable before the war. Now she held the power to decide which species would prosper under human rule and which would be left to fend for themselves in an increasingly dangerous galaxy. The applications came in daily. The Trilaxians, a peaceful trading species, sought formal trade agreements and protection for their merchant fleets. The Morphic Collective offered to share their advanced biotechnology in exchange for security guarantees. Even the surviving Quillan splinter groups, scattered and broken after the destruction of their hive worlds, begged for refugee status within human space. Lee reviewed each application carefully, applying the simple principle that now governed galactic affairs: those who served humanity's interests prospered, while those who opposed them faced systematic elimination. It was harsh, but effective. The galaxy had learned quickly that cooperation with the hegemony was the only path to survival. Outside the station, Commander Yang Minsu supervised the final construction of Monument Plaza. The project had taken 3 years to complete, transforming what had once been a docking bay into a beautiful memorial garden. At its center stood a statue of Ambassador Kim Minji, carved from black stone quarried from Earth itself. The statue showed Minji as she had appeared in her final moments, standing tall and proud, her diplomatic credentials in her hand, facing her executioners with dignity. But it was the inscription at the base that had become famous across the galaxy, carved in over 100 alien languages: "Harm one human, answer to all humanity." These words had become more than just a memorial inscription. They were the fundamental law of the new galactic order, repeated on every human ship, every military base, every diplomatic facility. Every species in the galaxy knew them by heart, and most had learned to fear them. In the deepest archives of the hegemony, teams of human scholars worked to preserve the records of the old Galactic Council. They studied the recordings of ancient debates, the decisions that had led to war, the mistakes that had caused the extinction of entire civilizations. Their work was not driven by nostalgia, but by the practical need to understand how such disasters could be prevented in the future. The lesson was simple and clear: the old council had underestimated humanity's capacity for both diplomacy and total war. They had seen humans as primitive newcomers who could be bullied and dismissed. They had failed to understand that a species capable of great cooperation and peaceful exploration was also capable of unprecedented destruction when pushed too far. As evening fell on the station, Supreme Commander Park Jin-ho walked through the memorial gardens that now covered much of the facility. The gardens were filled with plants from Earth and from dozens of other worlds, creating a living symbol of the diversity that the hegemony now protected. But they also served as a reminder of what had been lost. Jin-ho paused before a smaller memorial that listed the names of human soldiers who had died in the war. Captain Bae Jiwon's name was at the top, along with her special operations team that had sacrificed themselves during the siege of Nexus Prime. Thousands of other names followed, each representing a life given in the service of humanity's survival. The galaxy had changed in ways that would have been impossible to imagine 5 years earlier. Humanity had entered the galactic community seeking friendship and cooperation. They had been rejected with violence and contempt. Now they ruled through strength, having learned that some species only understood the language of superior firepower. Trade routes that had once been controlled by alien cartels now flew under human protection. Scientific research that had been hoarded by ancient civilizations was now shared freely among species that served the hegemony. Conflicts that had raged for centuries were settled quickly by human arbitrators who had no patience for traditional diplomatic games. The stars belonged to humanity now, not because they had sought conquest, but because they had been forced to choose between dominance and extinction. They had chosen survival, and in doing so, had discovered that they were very good at ruling others. But Jin-ho knew that this new order was built on a simple foundation that could never be forgotten. No one would ever again kill a human diplomat and live to see another sunrise. The galaxy had learned this lesson at a terrible cost, and he would ensure it was never forgotten.